anything is still better than nothing, right? So I'm going to try and outline some key moments of starter replacement on N51 and N52 engines. I have taken everything apart, or we have taken everything apart already. I guess everything is disconnected, but I wanted to, I guess, like I said, to highlight some key moments of the intake manifold removal, because that is what's needed in order to get to the starter on this car. Okay, let's just get to the point. Well, first of all, you have to remove all the plastics here, and that's fairly easy. There is well, just basically the air filter. There is 2 screws on the sides of this thingy. Those come out. This strut brace, you have to remove the strut brace. There is a bolt on this end. There is a cover, a plastic cover in the middle of lower windshield cover, and there is a Torx head screw. You loosen this up, you don't have to remove it, and this basically gets pulled out. You really don't have to remove the other side. You end up with a couple of wires that are just going to stay like this for the duration of your starter replacement job. I also got the power steering out of the way. Naturally, you have to also, I forgot, remove the air intake box, air filter intake, get that thing out of the way. Once you do that, you can actually start unhooking all of the connectors. There's this tube kind of a little bit in the way, oil pressure sensor cable connector that is kind of in the way, and hook this one. There's a intake manifold pressure sensor connector. There is 2 of these connectors on the top of fuel rail. They go in between the runners. The other thing to do is to disconnect your fuel line. This is this one here. It's just one of those connectors that you have to push. This blue plastic ring, you just push it in and then pull the fuel line off. What else is in the way is okay, 2 connectors on this side of the manifold for diesel valves. If you have N51 engine, you would have those plugged. If you have N52, you will just have the blind connectors with wires. You have to push those down and disconnect them from the manifold. That's that. What else am I forgetting? Heated PCV valve is on the back of the intake manifold. There is one cable coming to that, and there is a evap type of a system or vacuum that is attached to the throttle body, but I will get to those. At this point, I guess you can remove the intake elbow, which is like this, and it's got a hose clamp basically. This is just a 6mm hex on this end. Once you remove this, well, this is questionable. You have to / don't have to remove the throttle body. The throttle body is attached to the intake manifold with 4 bolts like this. It's a 10mm hex, M6 bolts, 4 of them on, well, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. They are pretty easy to get to. A connector on the throttle body, which is also has to be disconnected, even if you keep the throttle body attached to the intake manifold. Disconnect that. Once you do all that, you basically are, well, you're getting close to actually pulling the intake manifold off. There is a row of, I guess, a couple of studs with nuts and a couple of bolts. So a few bolts, a few nuts, you remove all those. Once you do that, your intake manifold is actually going to be fairly easy, fairly free. The fuel line / hose is attached to the intake manifold with a bracket and self-tapping screw on the last cylinder 6 runner here. You need to remove that screw. And the last thing that's kind of difficult is this crankcase ventilation hose. These things are fairly tricky to remove, and they usually break, especially if your engine is 100,000 plus miles. So be prepared to actually replace that hose. It's not a flexible, really, well, it may be flexible when it's new, but once it gets older, this starts to feel like a real hard plastic. This type of a connector is a pain, because what you have to do, you have to squeeze. So here's basically how this connection or fitting works. you have to, there is this plastic ring around the center of the fitting or hose tube. You have to squeeze this much, so these tabs actually release, and it's all behind on the back side of the valve cover. So your best bet is well, try and be inventive. Really, it usually, like I said, it quite often breaks. The bottom line is this needs to be disconnected, and it's the back side of the valve cover, like I said, and that tube is actually this insulated tube which goes behind and under of the intake manifold. Once you disconnect that tube, you are really ready to... No, you're not. There is a like electrical junction box, whatever, that has a bunch of cables going through, and it's attached to the intake manifold with 2 screws. Okay, it's something like this, a screw of about this size. Well, this is exactly the screw that's in there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this little tiny small camera and just stick it right there. Okay, so this left side screw is actually going to be right here, right there. I'm using my finger instead of a screwdriver or pointer, right in here. And it's going to be attached to the intake manifold right there. That's where it's going to be. So this is one side, and there's the same situation on the other side of the throttle. Well, I guess that's why it makes sense to remove the throttle body, because you have a better access to some of these things. And this screw on this side is going to be attached right here. Okay, so where my finger is, right there, that's okay. Where my finger is going to be the other screw holding this bracket, which is right there on the bottom now. That's the other end of it. Right there. And the screw is right here, like I said, 5 times already. While we are here, here's another thing to disconnect. On the left side of the, basically, of the throttle body, there is this evap or whatever hose, and it's connected or attached to this fitting. So you have to disconnect this and just push it down like so. And I guess, like I said, that's why it makes sense to remove the throttle body, to me at least. I guess that's why we removed it. Once you are done with all that, you're really ready to remove or pull the intake manifold off the engine. You basically just pull it this way and rotate it like so. One thing to really do is this heated PCV valve that actually has a recall on many of these cars. It has a connector, has got a connector, so you need to disconnect this too. Once that's disconnected, it's just basically coming off like this. And that's the back side of this intake manifold, and this is the tube, like a Y-shape that you have to replace if you break it. I kind of forgot to mention that the fuel line may actually, well, it's actually going through another kind of bracket or a clip holding it to the intake, and it's just a plastic thing that you just open and pull fuel line out of it. Okay, I'm going to flip this over and show this end. So basically that's the throttle body. Like I was trying to explain, 4 bolts holding it. There is this fitting on the side. These are the 2 screws I was just talking about that hold that electric box. I guess that's one of those that I missed. I think that's what's holding the 12 volt starter cable. That's pretty much all. And at this point you're actually going to face your starter. It's just going to be right there. What you have to do to remove the starter at this point, you have a couple of things to do. Battery cable, basically you have to disconnect this from the back side of the solenoid. 13mm hex nut. The other thing is naturally your I don't know where it is. Well, that thing is somewhere. I kind of not have finding it. What is wrong with me? Here it is. This connector on the back side of the solenoid is basically what makes this whole thing click. press to disconnect that. And at that point all you have left is 2 bolts holding the starter to the engine block. One of those bolts is they are aluminum Torx E14. One of them is in front and it's the short one. Just remove that one. There's one in the back and it's basically it goes through the transmission and engine block and into the starter. Okay, to remove that bolt in the back I have this wrench, and that's all that you need. It's E14 Torx. This wrench is a perfect fit for that bolt. This bolt just goes through and out. And once you do all this, you are really ready to pull the starter out, and there's the starter. And that's the end of the job. It's a fairly straightforward and easy job to do, and it doesn't really take that much time to do it. I don't think we spent more than, I don't know, 30 minutes or something like that last night getting all this removed. That's all to it. The other thing that I'm kind of suggesting to really pay attention to at this point, if you're doing this job, is to get to crankshaft position sensor. It's right there under the starter, sort of. It's kind of hiding under the starter, I guess. My suggestion is once you get the sensor exposed like so, just replace it, because they fail and it's not an expensive thing to replace.